Today on the Income Flip Network, I actually have Angela Healy with me. Angela, welcome to the Income Flip, where we discuss all things real estate and feature all real estate entrepreneurs. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Well, let's talk a little bit about corporate rentals, right? That is your area of expertise, and it's been that area of expertise for some time. You said 21 years, right? You've been
Yes, 25 years. Yes.
25 years. Okay, playing the game for 25 years. But I'm sure you didn't start in corporate rentals, did you?
I did not. Actually, I started my real estate, I'm going to call it a career, even though I was 7. It was actually my parents' career, and they had full-time jobs, but they decided to also do rental property on the side as additional income, and their rental property was able to put all 4 of their children through private college.
Oh, wow.
And I saw that there was definitely an income potential with real estate and learned from ground up. I was underneath houses holding flashlights for my dad doing plumbing work. So I got into the nitty gritty from a very young age and knew it was something that I wanted to do.
When did you actually start? Like,
So I purchased my first real estate, my first property. I was planning on living in it. I purchased a condo in San Francisco in 1995.
mhm.
And I was immediately house poor. And I lived there for about 6 months and finally decided that the ramen noodles were getting very old and I needed to do something else. And I kind of stumbled into corporate housing at that point, although I didn't make it a career at that point. I was a commercial banker, was happy being in banking, but a corporation rented my property from me and I moved out and moved into an apartment that was more affordable for me. But I saw this corporation rent this property from me for 3 years and they were paying top dollar because I was allowing them to go month to month, and it was fully furnished, included everything that they needed, internet, everything was included. And it was definitely an opportunity to maximize the income of that particular property.
Interesting. So that opened up your eyes to what was possible. But did you take action straight away, or were you more just like that was the first awareness of it?
That was the first awareness. I remained a commercial lender for about 10 years before moving into kind of doing this full time. Commercial lending at the end of the 90s was really going through an internal consolidation, and I decided that I didn't necessarily want to be a banker for the rest of my life, and I left banking and decided to get into real estate and move to Colorado.
You moved to Denver, big life change,
Yes.
right?
And we started a small real estate brokerage in Denver, focusing on managing other people's properties for this corporate rental concept.
Hmm.
There were enough corporations right here in downtown Denver that needed this housing, and we were able to kind of match the properties that were in our program with the corporations we were working with.
Okay, that's interesting. So let's get super tactical, right?
Okay.
You get your license. Okay, you're in commercial lending. You get your license. You decide to actually open up a brokerage, like a little mini brokerage, right,
Yes.
for this. And then you're like, okay, I'm gonna go rent these assets and try to get it at one price and then re-rent it at another. Like, what? Help me understand your
So
thinking behind it. Who the first client was, which way you attacked it.
Absolutely. So that's more rental arbitrage where you're renting something and then trying to rent it at a higher rate. And we looked at it slightly differently because we were doing real estate property management. We were taking people's properties in on exclusive agreements where they were providing it exactly the way that we needed it, fully furnished, utilities, everything included. And then we were doing a revenue sharing program with those property owners when we rented it. We were both reaping, the income from that. And corporations will pay a higher rental rate for a couple of reasons. One, you're providing it fully furnished, everything is included, they're not having to pull all the pieces together. Secondly, we're doing month to month rentals, giving them an opportunity to have that flexibility. What if that employee moves to another assignment or leaves the company or finds some sort of permanent residence? They need to be able to get out of that lease with a shorter term commitment, like a 30-day notice or even a 15-day notice.
Okay, interesting. I never thought of this before. I'm so glad we're having this discussion. So you attacked it from the property management side,
Yes.
but instead of you taking on the risk of the lease, right? You just said, let's partner on this. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
And how did that partnership, how do you structure that part? And do you still do that today? Is that your model
We
today?
do.
Okay.
That is still our model today. And it really is a win-win-win for all three parties. The property owner is getting more on an annual basis than they would if they rented it unfurnished.
Hmm.
The corporation is getting what they need with regards to that flexibility I was just talking about. And then Avenue West can make, its management fee, its share on bringing all of these parties together. So it's really a win-win-win. And so, because what you were talking about before, the arbitrage, yes, you're giving that property owner peace of mind that they're going to get a small amount every single month on the first, no matter what. And there are many investors that need that kind of peace of mind. Like, I know I'm going to get this money on the first in order to pay the mortgage. But if you have an investor that has the ability to look at the cash flow on an annual basis, we may not have your property rented every single month of the year, but we will have it rented more where you'll receive more than that baseline every single month. So if you have the ability to have those ebbs and flows with your cash flow, you can make more if it's the right property. That's the other key. It has to be the right property for the corporations because not every property is right for the corporations.
Okay, let's pause on that, and we'll come back to that in a bit.
Okay.
But I want to go
Yes.
back to how you structure it. So I understand you talk to the seller, or not the seller. You talk to the homeowner, and you say, okay, we've got this corporate rental program that we could put you
Mhm.
into, and if we put you into this corporate rental program, yes, it may not always be rented, but overall, the aggregate over time, you'll net more money. Okay,
Yes.
and you'll get your management fee, right,
Mhm.
for that. Now, I assume the management fee is a higher management fee than, let's say, maybe a standard 10%. Are you creating
Right.
some kind of arbitrage as well, where you're like, okay, we'll make an additional $1,500 of which you get half of, we get half of, plus we get our management fee?
So we do it strictly as a management fee, but it is a 30% instead of a 10%. Because if you took an example like here in Denver, if you had an unfurnished property that maybe you were renting for 1,800 a month, a one bedroom, it's very possible that we're going to be able to rent that property for $3,500 per month. So even though you're paying us 30% instead of 10%, you're still making more
Yeah,
on the annual basis. Hmm.
yeah, I love that. That's that's cool. That's very cool.
Yes.
So, what makes the perfect property then for
Yeah.
in Denver, right? Because I'm sure every area is slightly different.
Every area is slightly different, but they all have very similar qualities. It has to be very close to the corporation's place of employment. So people will tell me all the time, "Oh, it's only a 15-minute drive." They want it closer. They want them to be able to walk there if possible. So it has to be somewhere very close. So if they're in a downtown center, that's pretty easy because then you can usually find condo buildings that are around within walking distance of that downtown center. But they also need 24 by 7 security. They want amenities in the building. So if it's a gym or a pool or barbecue grills or whatever the amenities are, and then they also want inside the property to be kind of a Class A property. They're going to be paying top dollar for the property. They don't want Formica countertops. They want the granite, the stainless steel, the hardwood floors, the different things that really make it that Class A property. And a lot of the downtown condos that are selling, they are selling that way. So it's not like you're having to go in and renovate a condo that was built. Most of them were built that way. So it makes for a nice cookie cutter. Like here in Denver, we have like the Spire building. It is our number one requested building. Oh, the other piece it has to have is parking, and washer and dryer in the property. Um, it's the number one requested building, and we manage more properties in that building than we do anywhere else around. And I've had property owners tell me, "Oh no, I want my property to be the only property in this building." And that is not a correct way to think, because when we have a corporation come in and say they're bringing 15 people on assignment, they want 15 one-bedroom properties in the same building. So if you are in a building that we have lots of properties for, you're open to these large assignments where we can put everyone in the same location. It's not competition. It's actually creating a marketplace for your property beyond just the property
Yeah,
itself.
it's creating efficiency for them, right,
Yes.
as well. Fascinating. So, are you approaching the condo buildings? Well, I would assume that you have to worry about HOA, right? Like
Regulations, yes.
regulations, like the building's got to be okay with it, with the owner occupant versus investor occupied.
Right. And the 30-day minimum stay.
Oh, that's it. It's
Um,
the 30-day minimum stay
mhm.
is the one. It's got to be 30 or longer.
30 or longer, correct. And, lots of cities have gone through that same transformation where they've said, hey, we're really low on housing. So, one of the ways that we're going to combat that is to require a 30-day minimum so that the hotels are hotels, that the Airbnbs really are not inside of the city. Um, and the midterm rental has been a great way to kind of pivot if you were in. So,
Hmm.
so we had in Las Vegas about almost 10 years ago now, we had a lot of Airbnbs that were doing nightly stays, and they had an unfortunate event that occurred in the city with the shooting, and they changed their rules almost overnight and said, okay, Airbnbs are no longer going to be like they were before. And so we had several buildings that we went into and spoke to the HOA in the HOA meeting and said, look, don't unfurnish your properties. Let's just turn it into a midterm rental instead of the short-term rental. And you'll be able to now get a different highest and best use of your asset instead of turning it unfurnished.
Interesting. Okay, so are you first approaching? I would imagine you're probably going to corporations first. So you have to build these relationships with corporations. Is that right?
I'm very sorry. You're going to have to edit that. I have my phone on Do Not Disturb, but a call came in and I couldn't hear you.
That's okay. That's okay. No problem.
Do you mind asking the question again?
Yeah, yeah, no problem. I said I assume you're going after from a lead generation standpoint, right? Are you going to corporations first? You're saying who do you have transferring in? Then are you approaching homeowners? I mean, how do you connect those dots? How are those dots getting connected?
So I actually have two separate teams, one who focuses on getting the properties and one that focuses on working with the corporations and finding out what their needs are. And then we're kind of matching that. So we know that there's a particular amount of volume here in Denver, so we need to have a certain number of properties. And they're not all just one bedroom condos. We have to have an array, a couple of two bedrooms, some houses in the right school districts, that kind of thing. Um, and then we have a group that goes and works with the corporations and says, "Hey, we'd like to be, your provider for your midterm housing, and what can we do to match what we have with what you need?" And we've been doing the corporation piece since 1999, so we have a lot of companies that we've been working with a very long time and have deep established relationships with those companies. Um, And the other thing we're bringing them is we're bringing them all of the properties that they need. It's not just one property owner coming and saying, hey, rent my one property, even though Microsoft, I know you need 1,000 properties. So you really kind of need a company like ours to be able to bring that matching together. And it's worked very well for us. So
Angela, you mentioned Vegas. Are you then currently doing properties outside of Denver proper in other
oh,
markets?
yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
How
We
many
are.
how many do you have under management right now?
So under management, we have about 500 properties under management. And then we have other properties that we'll work with outside of the management program. So if we have a particular need, like right now, I'm not licensed in New York, but we have a particular need in New York. And so we've worked with a couple of investors that own buildings in New York where they're doing the management of their property. We're just renting. So that one's a little bit more like the arbitrage. But the core model is the management.
Yeah, that's cool. So anybody that's listening to this that is, you know, a little ambitious, thinking maybe that's my niche, right? That's what I want to do. What words of wisdom would you get? Like, where does somebody screw this up, right?
One, they're trying to fit what they have that might not meet that corporation's needs. So I have, unfortunately, Sonder went out of business and left a lot of people holding the bag, not just the tenants that were living in the properties, but Sonder was renting these buildings from investors and they had long-term leases with them. And suddenly one day, Sonder is no longer your tenant. And you've got to figure out one, getting the property out of receivership, and then two, what am I going to do with it next? And they were really more like hotels. They were renting them nightly. So things like an air conditioning unit inside the window, that was okay because it's kind of a hotel. You're used to seeing that in a hotel. A corporation is not going to rent something with an air conditioning unit in the window. Um,
I watched a YouTube video the other day that talked about Sonder filing for bankruptcy, and I was like, oh my God, it's crazy. Like I had stayed a couple times on trips.
oh, had you?
Yeah, and I was like, oh, this is an interesting concept. They went into some of these newer buildings. They also did older buildings, but newer buildings, and it felt like they might have taken 25% of the units, and they
Yes.
had their own like little entrances, and it felt like it was almost like a Sonder apartment building within a larger apartment building, right?
Yes. Yes.
And I was like, oh, this is an interesting concept. And, now reflecting, knowing what I know about the business, to create that arbitrage when you've got like the complexity of people moving in and out, and it is like a hotel, it's very
Mhm.
expensive. The operating cost is
Mhm.
very, very expensive. And so, yeah, I was surprised, but not surprised at the same time,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So I could, I,
I was not surprised either. The sweet spot about corporate housing is that they're staying a minimum of 30 days. Our average stay is actually 99 days. So you're not doing that nightly or a couple of days a week turn, which is very expensive when you're having your maids come in, especially when you're renting it just on a per night rate. You're not really building in, well, you're trying to build in the cost for that turn, that maid service. With corporate housing, we will charge them the rent and we'll also charge them a fee for the turn. So we're able to take that turn cost and have that be separate. But when you're looking at the nightly hotel, that turn cost is part of your rent, basically. And the more you're turning it, the less you're making.
yeah, interesting. We own a number of rental properties, Airbnb properties in the Shenandoah Valley area. And when we first got into it about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we were like, wow, maid service is expensive. The turn is expensive. Like we had to find the right match of
Mhm.
days and service turn, and the operating costs were significantly more than I
Mhm.
was thinking. Okay. Do you do any insurance work as well, by any
Sure.
chance?
Yes. And we do have homes in our program as well. So if someone's home had a flood or a fire or some unfortunate circumstance and they can't live there anymore, the insurance company has to provide them with a similar type property to what they were living in before. And so we do get a lot of insurance claims through our homes that we provide.
Okay, awesome. To run a portfolio of 500? How many people do you need in the organization to run that kind of team? Like, how big's the team?
Sure. So it depends on how close they are together. So at one point in Denver, we were servicing all the way out by, if you know the Denver area, all the way out by the airport, which is at least 30 minutes away, all the way down into Highlands Ranch, which is another 30 minutes south. We were going all the way up to Boulder, which is about 40 minutes. So we had a pretty wide circle in what we were doing. The wider your circle, the more people you have to have.
Mm,
Now we are in Denver, very concentrated. 75% of my properties are within walking distance of each other.
that's amazing. That's so cool.
And
We teach this concept to our investors and to our agents called zoning a market, right?
Mhm.
It's you can't be all things to all people. You have to
Yeah.
decide who you want to be the superhero to in order to take over the market, right?
Mhm.
And it sounds like you've done that. You said, okay, like wait, hey, the tighter we get, the bigger our world actually becomes. Like it's kind of counterintuitive. It's like the smaller we get, the bigger we actually become because we,
Yes.
we, we just can perform at a higher level.
hmm and if something happens, like corporation calls us and say, hey, Joey's in this property and his lights just went out in his bathroom. Sure, I could probably walk him through it over the phone. Okay, let's hit the GFI button, or I could say, hey, I've got someone in the building that can be there in about 5 minutes. And to the corporation,
Yeah.
that's perfect, right? Oh
Awesome.
yes, they just serviced my needs within minutes. And so that's the other thing about corporate housing is you have to be able to service the customer when they need it, whatever the request is, because they're paying that high dollar. They don't want to be without internet for 24 hours. That's not acceptable. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, that's fantastic. So I live in a highly dense area, lots of tech companies called Reston, Virginia.
Oh yeah, very familiar with Reston.
And
My
so,
my banking days were Silicon Valley Bank.
oh,
Reston was one of our primary markets.
Silicon Valley Bank. You know what? I saw that on your LinkedIn profile, and I meant to ask. I was like, oh, like with what Silicon Valley Bank went through like a few years ago. Obviously, you've been so far removed from it, but
Yes.
that must have been like wow for you. Like I
Yes,
can't
it
believe that.
was.
Yeah.
I still had a lot of friends that worked there, so it was definitely heartbreaking.
So I would think Reston would probably be a good area for something like
Absolutely.
this, right? Reston,
Mhm.
Ashburn, just there's a lot of tech corporations. We've got Google, Microsoft, Oracle.
Yes.
It's just
And tech is a very big user of corporate housing. Tech, oil and gas, healthcare, um, manufacturing. There's a lot of really good industries that use corporate housing. So finding those right companies, that's exactly what you need to do to find your market.
Angela. Do you guys also do long term, or you just said no, we don't want to do long term?
I had long term and I have a couple of residuals from that day, but we have been kind of weeding them down. It's very hard to have this one property where maybe you're making 1,500 a month, and then you have this other little property over here where you're making $200 a month. And the same things go wrong. It requires the same personnel to do the property management of this one over here where you're making 200 bucks versus this one where you're making 1,500. And it's just not cost effective
Yeah,
with what we're doing.
you leveled up your time, right? You leveled
Mhm.
up the business. Yeah, that's drastically different.
Yes.
That's drastically
But
different.
not that there isn't a business in having, 500 of the $200 is, you just need to know what your metrics are and run with it. If that's your strength, keep that. But if you're looking for something different, is this something that might be appealing as well?
Have you ever thought about, because this is something that we were thinking about, building a division within, like, let's say you have a parent umbrella that just does management, right? And you have the long-term arm, the midterm arm, the short-term arm. Or is that like just a recipe for disaster? There are three separate businesses,
They are
but
very much three separate businesses because you're looking for one completely separate property. So you're looking at property, Denver might have an Airbnb market on the short-term basis, but it has to be people's primary residence where they're moving out for no more than 90 days. So the property that's there and it can't be a 100% Airbnb property in Denver anymore because of the regulations. So then are you looking at, okay, where is Airbnb most successful? It's vacationers, right? So are you on the coast or, are you somewhere where people want to vacation and you can make that very successful? And that is the highest and best use for those assets.
mm,
But then where is your unfurnished? Okay, well, my unfurnished are usually more houses in the suburbs, which again is pushing you out of your zone. And then the corporate is really in that core center downtown area. So you're really in three different areas. And I think it's very hard to make all three of them work together for a good profitability. Whereas if you really focused on one, um, I guess if you were large enough, if you
if you
had
were large enough and you had divisions,
several thousand doors, yeah.
but it makes a lot of sense, right? It goes back to even just deciding, right, which zone or which lane you're going to be the best at, right?
Yes.
It's hard to put your short-term hat on, your midterm hat on, your long-term hat. Like we own short-term, midterm, long-term rentals, right? I'm like
Mhm.
constantly switching hats the whole time.
Yes.
Luckily, I don't have to manage them. Uh,
Yes.
and we have it divided currently. Like we have a
Mhm.
short-term division to the
And that's
business.
smart. That's smart because then you have people that are just focused on the one piece
Yeah,
instead of trying to spread them too thin, going over the three different pieces.
yeah.
And even from the customer base. I mean, when you're renting unfurnished or when you're doing Airbnbs, you're really working with individuals. And on the unfurnished basis, are you dealing with collections issues or, what's happening to people in their everyday lives? The Airbnb, you're dealing with, okay, did these people have a party? What happened to this particular property? Whereas when you're dealing with the corporations, payment's not an issue, but it's that speed of service. You might be able to get to a clogged drain on an unfurnished property tomorrow. You have to get to that clogged drain on this midterm rental within an hour. So it's a very different expectation of
Interesting.
what's going on. Hmm.
Let's talk a little bit about the highest and best use because you've talked about that, right?
Yes.
That is really really important. I love kind of what you said. Like every market is slightly different, so you've got to figure out maybe what's the highest and best use in your market or your
Yes.
asset type, right?
Hmm.
What have you learned in that whole process? Like where to give me the mistakes you see people making? And I heard you say originally like people that are maybe trying to do corporate rentals in a suburb area is maybe, you know, round peg or what is it like square peg round
Yes.
hole, right?
And actually, some houses will work in the suburbs if you're in the right school district, because we will do relocating families. So when a company announces we're moving our headquarters from here to here, obviously they're moving families and things. So we are going to need the homes in the right school districts, things like that. Again, with the top amenities, everything that I had said before. Um, but when you are looking at the highest and best use of an asset, people will ask me, okay, I'm going to fully furnish this property. It's kind of in a B neighborhood, but it's up and coming. It's really turning. The corporation's not going to go there. The number one responsibility for the corporation is that employee's well being. So they're going to pay an extra $100 or $200, whatever it is, to put that employee in a class A, fully secure building and know that that employee is going to be safe and everything's going to be just fine versus, oh, well, let's try this up and coming neighborhood, that's really not going to work. Once it's up and coming, yes, but not in the middle of the transition.
Yeah, I could see that, right? Safety, security, right? There's liability issues. You
Yeah,
put me in this
there are.
house, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
is which is why I can also see why the cluster effect would work
Yes.
well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
we've had 20 other people in here, 30 other people in here, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, give me a sense for, when you get an assignment, is it like three at a time, five at a time, two at a time?
Yeah, so it can be across the board. So it can be, so we'll work with the HR directors and they'll be like, okay, Fred's coming this week, let's find a place for Fred. Or it can be, we've got these 7 people coming, so let's handle this. Or it can be, um, we've got a group, we're moving 250 people from Denver to Texas. Um, how are we going to do this? Do we want to stagger them over time? Do we want to move them all at once? So we really work with those corporations to figure out what is important to them. Do they need everyone down there at one time to start this project that they're working on? Or is it going to be more of a gradual move? Because if they can do it as a gradual move, you can take the same properties and put Fred in it this week, and then 2 months later put Joe in, or whatever it might be. And you're also not creating um, a run on your properties, if you will. So there's only so many available depending on the market that you're in, and if you're bringing 250 people in, naturally the prices are going to rise. Whereas if you're bringing them in, okay, let's do 50 this month, 50, that month, or whatever it is. So we can try to keep the pricing stable for them.
Angela, back in my old days, recruiting technical salespeople, that's what I did for
Oh,
7 years,
yes.
right? We
Hmm.
would, I dealt with a lot of directors of HR and
Hmm.
uh, and VPs of sales, but more directors of HR. And we saw people moving in and that whole piece, and we would always sign contingency agreements for the work, meaning like if we place somebody in the company, we
Hmm.
then got paid a fee. But we also knew
Yes.
there was three other recruiters in there also competing for
Yes.
that same work. Is it the same with corporate housing where they're like working with you and working with somebody else and it's like whoever fills the spot? Or is it like they just sign an agreement with you and you have like a retainer to fill those spots?
Mhm. So it can be both ways. Some corporations always go out on the open market, and we'll get the lead and we'll give our best foot forward and see what happens. But then there are corporations. So say they are moving 250 people, they need to be able to fill every one of those 250 slots. So they will sign agreements with one or maybe two corporate housing companies so that they know no matter what, you're going to house these people within this kind of pricing parameter. And so it really kind of depends on the particular circumstance and what they're doing and how many people they're bringing in.
Yeah. Years ago, I remember an embassy rented one of our properties, and I was like, "Oh,
Hmm.
that's pretty cool, right?"
Yes, yes,
And I was like, "That I'm sure there's a niche there in the DC market for that."
yes, there is. And
Right.
not just DC, there are embassies all over.
That's
We
true.
house them in San Francisco all the time. So, um,
What markets are
absolutely.
Angela? What markets are you in? Cool.
So actively, we're in San Francisco, Sacramento, Reno, Las Vegas, Phoenix area, all up and down the front range of Denver, up from northern Colorado down to Colorado Springs. We are in Dallas, St. Louis. And then we kind of have some
Hmm.
other areas that we're very heavily involved in, like Seattle, New York, Boston, DC.
Do you partner with people on those, or are those people that work full time for your company, or how do you do that? Because you're spread out geographically. That sounds hard.
Um, So in some of the cases, they were originally franchisees that are we still have a small franchise program, and they are part of that program. In some of the cases, like I had mentioned, like New York, where we're working with building owners, and then we're filling the properties within those buildings.
That's cool. That's awesome.
Hmm.
Yeah, I could see. Yeah, I could see you helping, I'm just giving you an idea, right? And this
Yes.
is probably not an idea that hasn't crossed your brain. And we looked at the franchise model, and we also have multiple offices in other markets, right?
Hmm.
And so we looked at the Chick-fil-A model, which is more of like a partnership model, right? Versus a franchise model, more profitable, by the way, way more profitable than franchise. But I remember thinking, and we do a lot of investments, right? Like we help people, like our local team, we have an acquisition arm that buys 5 to 6 houses a month, and we just turn those houses and
Okay.
we sell the paper to other investors. And I remember thinking every real estate team like mine should have an investment plug-in like the one that I have, right? And that
Okay.
we should help them build that. Like we either help them build it or we partner with them to help them build it, right?
Okay.
And I'm thinking on the corporate side, right? Every real estate team like mine,
Hmm.
and when I mean like mine, like high volume, like lots of they zone local markets, they're high productive, they're community focused. They
Hmm.
should potentially think about having a corporate division, right? Management division to their business. But it's a whole nother business, right? So you need the right
It
who, you
is.
need the right Angela to guide them in that whole process, right? And I could
Yeah,
see,
but maybe we could partnership with them. So maybe they don't have the corporation connections, but they have the properties. Could we partner with them? Like, say they had a building in New York or New Jersey or Boston, or where they could do the property management piece of it, but then we could rent it and put our clients in it. Absolutely.
yeah, that's what I'm thinking, the partnership piece, right? And
Hmm.
is it work the same way, like long term? Is it like collect first month's rent up front? Are you charging security?
No.
No, none of that.
No, it's
Okay.
very different. You don't go into Microsoft and say, "Hey, give me 1 month security deposit and first and last month's rent up front." No, we bill monthly, and they pay us monthly,
Just like a
and
subscription.
then they sign a letter of guarantee. So if something happens to the property, we
Hmm.
would then just provide them with documentation and receipts, and then they pay for the repair.
I'm so naive. Yeah, I was like, I gotta go into Microsoft and ask them. I need first month's and last month's rent. I'm not quite sure
Yes.
you're gonna. Well, that's cool. Yeah, and I imagine these are relationships, right, that you've built with these directors of HR for years and
Yeah.
years. Yeah, that.
And it's a small enough knit community.
Yeah,
You know it from the tech world, just because so and so might be the HR director here, but then they've been HR directors at how many companies in their lifetime. So
yeah, yeah. They move, and that relationship moves to another relationship. Yeah,
yes,
fascinating. Yeah, I remember joining Sherm. I don't know if Sherm's around, but
yes,
yeah,
yes, it is.
remember joining Sherm. Well, cool. Well, Angela, like I love this conversation. It's been tactical. It also has helped me, so I appreciate that selfishly. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, this is I'm learning. I feel like I've met a friend that can maybe help us, or maybe we can partner on this journey, right? As we
Absolutely.
we're always building vertically integrated businesses into kind of like a core,
Mhm.
engine. Like we've got this one core engine, but we want to plug in like these vertically integrated businesses in our area and be known for that locally. So
Yes, absolutely.
I appreciate that insight. I'd like to pivot just quickly and you know, ask you a question that has less to do with like tactical business, but more to do with thinking, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
you've been an entrepreneur, you've been a business owner for many, many years, right?
Yes.
And being a business owner is not for the faint of heart,
Oh,
right?
very much not. Yes.
And I'm sure you've seen, you know, your fair share of like, or had your fair share of, oh snap, this
Yes.
isn't good. Now maybe it's less so in your business because it feels like maybe it's more stable. Although your contracts are not year-long contracts, they're short contracts, right? So
Right.
maybe you can give us an example of like an O snap and how you pivoted from the O snap moment.
Yeah, I mean, our biggest one was COVID. once everything started shutting down, the first thing corporations did was give us all their 30-day notices and said, everyone come back home.
Oh,
Oh,
snap.
snap. Yes.
Seriously. Wow.
And so certainly there were days where, I was hyperventilating and, what are we going to do? Everybody's moving out within 30 days. And, my husband and I really sat down. Oh,
I'm just
good.
I'm just picturing it. I'm like, oh my God. Like that
Mhm.
is crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
You got 30 days and
Everybody's gone.
everybody's gone. Your revenue's gone in 30 days, essentially.
Yes, basically. And, my husband and I sat down and we're like, okay, let's think about this. There has to be a play here.
Mhm.
And what we realized was most of those people who left were going to hotspots. They're going back to New York. They're going back to LA. They're going back to San Francisco. And we said, what can we do to help them now personally say, I don't want my family in the middle of this hotspot. I want to move to northern Colorado, where I can still have a normal, relatively family life. Um, and my kids are homeschooled and I'm working remotely. I could go anywhere. And so we started reaching out to all of our corporations and saying, hey, we know as a company you're not moving people, but do you have any employees that want to get out of the hot spots? And that was the recipe that we needed. Everybody moved out of New York, out of LA, out of California, and came to all of our other cities that we had. Now, San Francisco, unfortunately, that market we weren't really able to turn around, but everywhere else we were able to fill, and then some. A lot of the areas grew. If you think about what happened post, a lot of corporations moved out of California and into Phoenix, into Texas, into Colorado. So but there was no snap there. There was definitely a no snap. Like, are we about to go out of business? And we were able to pivot and make that turn.
Wow. Wow. That's awesome. We just had our corporate advance and the term was pivot, right? Like good businesses are always thinking about changing markets and pivoting in the changing markets and flowing with flowing in the direction of the energy as opposed to against, right, the direction
Yes.
of it. And so you said, oh, you thought about like what does this actually mean and how can we put ourselves in the path of a solution, right,
Yes.
for that. But how did you guys monetize that? Like you went and the individuals would contact you and you would place them in
Yeah,
another
and then
place?
they would pay. So we had a lot of individuals paying us instead of corporations, but they all had great jobs. They were working for the companies that we were used to. So just because they were paying us individually, it worked out just fine from a collections point of view.
No, fantastic. Kudos
Hmm.
to you. And anybody listening to this, right? That that's a baller move. That is a how do we figure this thing out? Because I remember having that say, I turned to my wife and I said, we're screwed, right? Nobody's going to pay. We own a bunch of properties. I was like, who's going to pay us? Like everybody's just not going to pay us. Luckily, I think we had like 90% still pay
Oh,
and
that's
right.
great.
And then real estate sales took off, which that was unexpected, right? It was like, who's going to buy a house during the pandemic? Only everybody, right?
Yeah, who
So
wanted more space
yeah,
because they couldn't be with everybody.
that's right. They left and they went and that's actually what got us into buying a lot of those vacation rentals in these submarkets as well, right? So,
Mhm.
well, what? Okay, I said that was the last question, but there is one final question I have. Right? It's what are the trends you're seeing? Because I would imagine that you're almost like frontline and center with some of the corporate trends that are happening with people that are moving in and out of markets. And like, what trend are you seeing for
Yes.
2026?
Yes, so it's good and bad. One, we're on the cutting edge, which is always fun, but you don't have like a predictor to tell you what's going to be happening because you're on the forefront of it. So what we're seeing now, is manufacturing is really taking off. And a lot of it having to do with AI and building the data centers and the power associated with all of that. Or it's car manufacturers that are coming into the United States, or semiconductors coming into the United States that used to be outside, but now the tariffs are higher. So they're bringing all of that. So when you hear about the trillions of dollars of investment these companies are bringing into the United States, that also includes people. And so, as long as the government's open, they can get their visas, right?
Yeah.
And then they're bringing them into the country and we're housing them for a lot of times longer term stints because they may be coming in on a 5 year project or they might be on a 2 year visa. They're not going to buy a house in a 2 year visa. They're going to come in for their 2 years and then they're going to go back. So, temporary housing is a perfect solution for them. Um, and so that's really where I'm bullish for 2026.
Yeah. I'm thinking about all the data centers that are being built right here in my backyard. Hmm.
Yes.
Well,
And in
Angela,
the middle of nowhere. That's the other piece. The real trick is they're also being built in the middle of nowhere. And then we're having to figure out, okay, how are we going to get 250 people to build basically a town, and
that's
yeah.
interesting. Yeah, that's
Hmm.
interesting. Opportunity there. Well,
Yes,
Angela, thank you so much for sharing your insight and your wisdom with with our community. I appreciate it. Right.
absolutely.
And if there's anything we could do for you, if there's anything I could do for you, just let me know. If people listening to this wanted to reach out to you directly, there might be a director of HR, there might be, you know, somebody that's moving to Denver. How would they do so? What's the best way?
Yeah, my email is angela@avenuewest.com, or you can find us at our website, avenuewest.com.
We'll make sure that we link it in all the show notes. And so,
Perfect.
Angela, thank you so much for spending time with
Yes,
us today.
thank you for having this conversation. This was wonderful.